There we are. Okay. Hello, it's, well, Dan. Here we are again, and I've got this thing in front of me, the analog synthesizer. Well, not completely analog. There's a couple of digital components in there, maybe one or two, but for all intents and purposes, for the most part, an analog synthesizer with a rack of modules on top. And I've decided to do something very disastrous today, and that is to wire up something completely from scratch. The duck's around here somewhere. I forgot where I put him. But anyway, I'm going to start by working backwards, because while I have all this stuff on top, well, why don't I introduce the parts here. So this is, of course, the analog synthesizer keyboard, MIDI Brute 2 by Arturia. And then I've got the rack case, the rack brute, also by the same. It comes with a power supply, and inside it I've installed some modules here. This is an oscillator, something that generates a signal, generates noise. To the right of that, over here, because this rack is not quite filled up all the way, the next thing I've got is a ring modulator, which also serves as a 2-channel amplifier if I wanted to use it to mix two different signals together. You can see the dual knobs here, one section here, one section here. And then you've got the low frequency oscillator, which is kind of like the oscillator, except this operates in really low frequency only. But that's good for modifying signals in other modules. To the right of that, I have an 8-step sequencer, and then to the right of that, I have this buff mult, I believe it's called, by IntelliGel, company IntelliGel, which is able to take up to two separate signals and split them 3 ways each. Or you can split one signal 6 ways. Really handy if you wanted to, say, take an LFO and send it all over the place to, any other modules, or as an example. And then over here I have a reverb module. It's Herbiverb. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Herbiverb by I just blanked on it. But the Herbiverb module. And, oh, yes, by Make Noise. It's on the bottom. And it's got lots of lovely different parameters you can play around with. Shout out to my friend Luke Stark, who loaned me, or let me have these 4 modules here: the ring modulator, the LFO, the step sequencer, and the buff mult. And they've come in pretty handy. I've used them in a couple other videos. But yeah, so I am going to try to do something disastrous, like I said, and try to make a sound from no wiring whatsoever. So the first thing we want to make sure of is that we are audible on both counts. So the keyboard is a lot easier to determine, if you just move on the sliders here on one of these oscillators. There are 2 in the keyboard synthesizer with different parameters for each. But anyway, suffice to say, if you heard that, then we know that we are able to hear the synthesizer. As far as the rack is concerned, that's a little more complicated, because right now we have no wires. So, I'm going to try to expand this here. Okay. So, what we want to do is make sure we get sound from any one of these modules out into the world. So how do we accomplish that? Well, it just so happens I happen to have some cables here that I unfortunately did not separate from each other. But we want to make sure that, because I'll be routing primarily through the keyboard, we want to place the appropriate length cable into the appropriate input on the keyboard to send a signal. So I'll go from the reverb module like I've done before, and now we've got signal output from the rack, at least somewhere. And beyond that, if we want to hear the oscillator, I'll take this handy pink cable here just to demonstrate. I'll go from the out on the oscillator, and we'll go in on the reverb. And tuck that in there. So we know that we are able to hear the oscillator. The issue being that because it's not receiving any sort of a gate signal, it will continuously feed signal out through its outputs. So we can change that. We can play around with that. For now, we know that the module works. So that's what matters here. And I also want to make sure that, before I forget, the keyboard, I'd like to go through the reverb module, this one over here. So I'll take a step back and actually unplug the oscillator over here from the reverb, and I'll plug it into one of the patch points on the ring modulator. I won't use the ring modulator to actually modulate anything. I will only use it as an amplifier of sorts. That being said, I need to do the same thing for the keyboard. So the last stage on the keyboard here, before it gets sent out, is through the amp module, which is over here. And its associated patch point is, I can't really see it unfortunately, but it's over here. And so I'll take this orange cable, plug it into the output of the amp, and I will plug out from the amp on the keyboard into the input on the ring modulator module. And so we should now be able to hear both. Oh, of course, I goofed on that. I'm sorry. Also take an appropriately sized cable and plug into the reverb from the main output of the ring modulator. It'd also be good to turn up the volume on the modulator here. So the oscillator over here will feed continuously, so I'll just keep on turning the module volume on the amp down, but effectively we have sound. So now that we've established that, what can we do? There are lots of things we can do here on the keyboard immediately. If I wanted to make some sort of a funky, well, gnarly lead sound or bass sound, which is what this keyboard's good for, I might want to play around with some envelope filter parameters. I'll be throwing some terms out, but this section which modifies the volume envelope, which is like a curve that goes over the volume, you can change, it can be changed to make it sound like it's drawn out, like it's fading in, and a couple of other different things. Envelopes can also be applied in other ways on other modules. That being the case, I will play around with this attack delay envelope on the amplitude so that it has a bit of a delay, as in it extends the note after I take my finger off the key. Of course, it'd be handy if I turn up the volume. And I'll contrast with the delay turned off. Turn it up to the maximum amount of delay, you get a much longer release. Well, a much longer tail at the end. So right about middle is good. Alright, so what else can we do here? I'll adjust the frequency filter to a little bit past halfway, and I will turn the resonance up a little bit so I get a big exaggerated point on the area where I turned the frequency to. So I kind of like that already. And I'll mix in on the first oscillator on the keyboard. I have 4 different waveforms. Think of them like repeating patterns of basic shapes in sound form. You've got your triangle, you've got your square, you've got your sawtooth, excuse me, square, triangle, and noise. And so we can, on the first oscillator on the keyboard, adjust those in any way you like. And each of those in turn have their own parameters that can affect each of those waveforms. Like pulse width modulation can affect the square wave. And so on and so forth. So I'm not going to get too much into detail on those for now. I just want to create noise, whether it's aesthetically pleasing or not. And the frequency modulation on the VCO1, oscillator 1. Kind of give it a little bit rough around the edge flavor. And then let's introduce the second oscillator here. I'm going to try to put it on the same frequency as the first oscillator. Actually, I kind of like that. Slightly detuned, so it gets a little bit of a chorusy effect. Okay, and there's also this brute factor, which is on the keyboard here, which kind of folds distortion over itself on the same signal. So basically get even rougher edge on the sound. Especially like the higher you go, the stranger it gets. And that can also be affected by LFO2, I believe. Or maybe not. Okay, so FM is affected by low frequency oscillator 1 on the keyboard. Sorry about that. That's pretty good. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not exactly 100%, but it's someplace. I'll just make a couple of adjustments here. Cool. All right. I'm not going to worry about too much routing over here for now. I want to make sure that I do a little mangling up here. So we have this, and hopefully you can still see it. I think that should be right. So we've got several different parameters here on this module. Not sure how well you can see it, but there are a couple of buttons on the top in between the two big knobs that can adjust the sound source type. And there are 2 rows, so you can switch between the two. So each successive press of one side of the button, or each successive press of either the left or the right side, will cycle through each of those sets of oscillators. Whoa, that's really neat. I haven't even really done anything yet. I'm just sort of cycling through here. Ooh, it's kind of like metallic, like I'm in a can or something. It's kind of like a perpetual bell ringing. Ooh. Let's play around with some of these knobs here. That's a frequency, of course, harmonics, and you've got your timbre, and you've got your morph, which also seems to serve as a volume knob. Ooh, formants. Wild. This is more of a standard classic analog synth type thing. We've got your bass fundamental pitch, and then you've got your harmonic, which is like your second oscillator. So you can kind of make like a fifth here between the two notes. And that's the mix of the volume between the two. Ooh. Kind of like another, that's like a resonance on the filter. Anyway, don't want to get too lost in this. But, I'm going to try to find something that's appealing. Okay, so I think I will stick with the format here. So what I'd like to try, because now we know that we can put cables from one module to another, I want to try to automate this so that I can slide between 2 points on this knob. How do you think we're going to do that? Well, I already mentioned about a general concept and parts of a synthesizer that can help with that. So the proper, or one of the possibilities, is to hook up a low frequency oscillator to modulate the parameter. In this case, it's the morph parameter. So what I want to do is take a longer cable than this one, probably. Well, that should be sufficient. And take one of these oscillator outputs and hook it up into morph. And I just need to find out where that is. That is over here. So we're probably going to hear some weirdness for a moment. Or not. Let's try again. Interesting. Try another cable, just make sure. Oscillator number 2. Going into that is interesting. Let's just make sure that this works properly. I want to change it to the frequency if I can. Okay. Interestingly. Huh. Okay. So the oscillator works. The low frequency oscillator works. Not sure why. There we go. It's alright. I'll work with it. Dull. Play with the reverb. Tilt in the middle, so it's equally dark and equally bright. This might be a little loud, so forgive me. Oh man. How it appears, I need to get an amplifier to amplify the plates oscillator because clearly it's not loud enough. Let's see if I can try to... Okay, so, well, we got a sound. It's interesting. It's not perfect, but it is interesting. It's not something I've encountered with this before. There needs to be a way to control the pitch. Now, there is a way to do that if I wanted to use the keyboard to control the pitch. So I'll take yet another cable. Otherwise, it's a lot of work to try to fine-tune the pitch on that oscillator to try to match what I'm playing on the keyboard. It might just be easier to synchronize it to the pitch of the keyboard and then fine-tune it to something that is at an interval. So, that all being said, I believe that's the keyboard over there, and I will take this brown cable and I will insert it into, let's see, where's trig? Well, it's probably going to, oh, actually I need pitch, which is frequency. Okay. Ooh. Okay, that's not quite what I expected. So it needs to be voltage per octave. That sounded funny. Okay, so let's try something else. I'm going to just attach randomly, and this is going to sound really wonky. So I plug this into sync or something else like that, and it's triggering, but it's not doing, it's playing a random note, it seems, every single time that I press it. Oh, that's gnarly. Okay. So, clearly not getting anywhere with that. Oh. So, what do we got? I am going to try, well, let's switch to another parameter here. And that's the classic analog sound. Okay. Do a quick little checkup here, so I'm not driving myself nuts with the patching. Can kind of get behind that rhythm, actually. Random. Faster. Almost self-oscillating there. Okay. I guess the oscillators on the red side are a bit more atonal. Anyway. Now. Oh, actually, let's, I like that. So that is our timbre. So actually, I'll take the other oscillator, low LFO, low frequency oscillator, and happy little accident. And yes, this is sometimes what synthesis comes to. You just explore and you're slow, don't go too quickly, and you try to read what you're trying to do here. Okay, so I kind of like that idea, but it's a bit much. So I'll limit that with this attenuator. Basically just narrows the signal down a bit so it doesn't go too crazy all over the spectrum of the modulation. Alright, so I do like that. However, it serves well as a nice little droney thing. I might want it to be a bit more sequenced, so what I will do to achieve that is a couple of different things. So there is a sequencer here. This is the an IntelliGel sequencer. It's an 8-step sequencer, which means it's got 8 different pulses, if you will, going in this order. And I can take yet another LFO. Actually, no, I won't. I will use this LFO, and I will actually plug it in to this buff mult, which copies the signal, and I will take this purple cable and send that back into our chamber. So now we're achieving the same result, and we can use that same LFO to modulate 2 other things. Namely, the sequencer will be the next one. And as the cables are falling around here, I'm awash in cables. So take the black cable, plug it into the second spot on the mult, and now, where was I going? Into the sequencer. Actually, I don't need a black cable. This cable is a bit too long. I will take a yellow cable. It's a lot shorter. And alright. Take the yellow cable, so I've got the red cable coming out from the amp here into the reverb. I've got the pink cable coming out from the plates. I've got the orange cable coming out of the keyboard, and then I've got the modulation everywhere else. And so now we can see, maybe you can see, the sequencer is now active and moving along. And at each pulse it receives, it blinks a little green light at the bottom, and it shows you what step it has with each red LED as it goes through the loop here. Now, this is the LFO it's coming out of. It's set to a fairly random setting the further you go in from the lowest setting on 1 all the way to 6. You get more and more random as you go through the first few typical waveforms, which are, sine, sawtooth, and so on and so forth. We may want that, we may not want that, but for now I'll keep it, because that will make it interesting. Now that we do have it, however, if I can, I will use this green cable, take it out of the output of A on the sequencer, and plug it into what I hope is the gate, or it's called trig here. So I'll go all the way down here. And okay, so we have absolutely nothing. That was not what I expected, but that's okay. So I will unplug trig, and we're back to square one. probably more of a sawtooth, a wave. That's a bit of a pun there, but... What I could do is link it up to the sequencer built in on the Arturia Mini Brute. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do that, but that's okay. You know, we're just fooling around here. So I think we can go from the output here on sync, and I'll take it to... Well, that was kind of neat little blip at the end. So tuck that in behind there, and I will set this, oh, it's already set to sequence number like 7 or 8 or 9, which I've emptied out so it doesn't make any sound on the keyboard. However, once I press the play button, we should hear some audio. At least, I hope so. Cool. Okay, so now I can affect the tempo with this knob here. There's a bit more that we need to get involved in order for this to work. So I will take the ADSR out of the keyboard. I didn't quite intend to have these interconnected so much, but I will use the ADSR filter, the attack, decay, sustain, release, out of the keyboard, and I will plug that into the level. So it's funny, while this ADSR filter envelope here affects the frequency on the keyboard, it will now affect the volume on the oscillator in the rack. I hope I'm right anyway. So let's see what happens. I will increase the delay to maximum, and the sustain and release, and we got nothing. Okay. This is not quite what I expected, but that's okay. How about... Where's the output on the AD? Oh, that's the ADSR, I'm sorry. Okay. Wait a second. Wait just a second. I am turning all these off. Okay, that was good. Okay, that frequency kind of sweep thing was coming out from the keyboard, so I apologize for that. So now, the good thing is, we have our ADSR. Except, while we do have a trigger, it's not exactly telling us, or we're not exactly telling it, the oscillator, what pitch we're working at. So that might be a bit more problematic, because of the way that the keyboard seems to send pitch to the oscillator. Maybe there's a special way to do it. I mean, it's kind of wonky, but you know what? I'll work with what I have. So it won't be perfect, but at least I will do this. So unless I have the wrong output here, that should be keyboard like before. And I will plug this into, where was it? Frequency? Oh, voltage per octave. There we go, yes. Ideally, that should sound much like the notes I'm playing on the keyboard. Crossing fingers. Not exactly what I had in mind. So bizarre. Or as a certain song title would say, how bizarre. But I will try doing this. Okay, so I'm going to take the keyboard out. I'm going to put it into the inverter. And I will take the output of the inverter and plug it into the keyboard, to the oscillator, so we can try to actually have the pitch direction somewhat matching what I'm expecting to hear. It won't be perfect, it'll be janky, but it'll work. So if you really wanted to play in a weird scale, I guess you could just do that. If anyone who has a greater mind than I have want to explain what's going on, feel free. But anyway. Okay. So now we got the pulse. And we have so bizarre. It's like the second note from the root is just like, I don't know what scale you're playing, man, but it's not quite the temperament I was expecting. Actually, let's go to those formants. Ooh. Yeah. Sounds like you're saying Q, 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 Q. Yeah, I'm crying all over this because I can't quite get this right. So yeah, this has been a complete disaster. But I've got some really interesting, wacky sounds out of this. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. And hopefully I'll be a little bit better prepared next time. Alright, well, thank you for watching. Hopefully your ears didn't bleed too much. And I will see you around.